This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. It's tax season, and we're all a bit tired of numbers. But here's one you need to hear. $16.5 billion. That's how much the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud last year. Now here's a good number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
This podcast contains adult themes and language, and some of the things that we discuss may be disturbing to some listeners. In this podcast, we discuss sexual assault, torture, race, and murder. Listener discretion is advised. Please take care of yourself.
So now let's get into the early life of Wanda Jean Allen. So Wanda Jean Allen was born in 1959. She was the second of 8 children. Her mother, Mary, was a woman who had a problem with substances, particularly alcohol, and she drank during her pregnancies. And Wanda Jean Allen's father abandoned the family soon after the last child was born, leaving Mary to raise the children all alone.
The family lived in a housing project in Oklahoma City and got by on public assistance. Because Wanda Jean was the oldest daughter, much of the responsibility for taking care of her siblings fell to her.
Wanda Jean did her best to keep the family fed, although she worked a number of odd jobs as a young teenager. It wasn't enough, and she often resorted to stealing food and stealing money to survive. As a result, she did have to spend some time in juvenile detention.
At the age of 12, Wanda Jean was hit by a truck and knocked unconscious. And then at the age of 14, she was stabbed in the left temple. So when I was reading about this, I was like, left temple, what? I was thinking forehead, but it's not. It's like that soft spot.
Oh, yeah. You
next to your eye.
Get in a fight with somebody and, pressure points. That's a spot you can push.
Oh, good to know. Yeah.
To disable somebody to get them to leave you alone.
Good to know.
Imagine something piercing. I mean, that's a soft part of your skull.
Yeah.
You could get to the brain.
Yes, absolutely. So a psychologist who examined Wanda Jean when she was 15 said that her IQ was so low she was borderline mentally disabled.
Because Wanda Jean manifested symptoms of brain damage, it was recommended that she be sent for neurological testing. But this was never done, mostly, I'm sure, because of resources, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so Wanda Jean struggled in school. And when she was 17, she just dropped out. So now let's get into the timeline. Hit it, Beth.
In 1981, Wanda Jean Allen was sharing an apartment with her childhood friend, Deidre Pettis. The two had grown up together in the same neighborhood. In some articles, Deidre is described as just a friend, and in others, she is described as Allen's girlfriend.
It's the 80s, right?
Yeah.
And so
hard
our
to
attitudes, were different about queer people, especially queer women of color.
Yeah. And they may not have been open about it.
Yeah. So in any case, on June 29th, 1981, the two got into an argument and Allen shot and killed Deidre. According to Allen, she accidentally shot Deidre from about 30 feet away while returning fire from Deidre's boyfriend. Deidre had stepped in front of the gun, and that's when she got shot.
However, the forensic evidence did not align with Allen's story. In particular, a police expert believed that bruises and powder burns on Deidre's body indicated that Allen had pistol whipped her, then shot her at point-blank range.
And again, this was the 80s, so forensic science and forensic evidence has evolved. But nevertheless, prosecutors decided to offer Allen a plea bargain. She agreed to plead guilty to manslaughter in exchange for a 4-year prison sentence and she ended up serving less than 2 years of that sentence.
That's nuts. That is such a short sentence for
It
killing
is
somebody.
a pretty short sentence, but again, this is also the 80s before
Right.
that mid-90s hard on crime wave
True.
hit.
Yeah.
So, different time.
Yeah. There we go again.
Yeah.
While in prison, Allen met and befriended a woman named Gloria Jean Leathers, who was serving time for forgery and larceny. Like Allen, Gloria had a violent past. She had been arrested for assault with a deadly weapon, assault and battery, and firearms possession. She also told Allen that she had once stabbed a woman to death.
Now, I looked for this case, the stabbing. Couldn't find it.
No, it was never verified.
Okay. So after Allen's release from prison in 1982, she and Gloria lost touch. But after Gloria was released in 1986, the two rekindled their friendship and began dating. Soon, they moved in together.
The couple had a turbulent relationship. They fought frequently, sometimes resorting to physical violence. The police were called to their residence on multiple occasions, and Gloria moved out half a dozen times. But after each spat, the pair would reconcile and Gloria would return.
They loved hard and they fought hard.
Yeah,
sounds like.
Apparently.
Yeah, so 7 years after the death of Deidre Pettis on December 1st, 1988, the two women got into an argument at a local grocery store. That's Gloria and Wanda Jean.
Right.
And Gloria had just received a check for financial assistance from the government, aka welfare, and Allen was demanding that she turn it over to her.
The fight escalated to the point that someone called the police. Gloria asked the responding officer if he would escort her home so that she could pick up some of her belongings. She was tired of fighting with Allen and intended to move back in with her mother.
The officer escorted both women back to the house and remained there while Gloria packed her things and called her mother, Ruby Wilson, to come and get her.
Angry at the fact that Gloria was breaking up with her, Allen threatened her and told her that if she couldn't have her, no one could. At the suggestion of the police officer, Gloria decided to go to the police station to file a complaint against Allen.
When her mother arrived, Gloria told her that she wanted to go to the police station to file a formal complaint against Allen. Gloria and her mother drove to the village police department in Oklahoma City to file the complaint.
Neither of the women noticed that Allen had followed in her own car. Allen later claimed that she went to the police station to file her own report. When Gloria exited the car, Allen attempted to get Gloria to reconsider moving out. When Gloria refused, Allen shot her in the stomach.
2 police officers heard the gunshot and immediately rushed out of the station to see what was going on. They saw Allen still brandishing the gun, jump into her car, and drive away. Zoom! And found Gloria on the ground in a pool of blood.
Gloria was still conscious, however, and was able to tell police who had shot her. Her mother witnessed the entire event and told the officers what had happened.
Ooh.
Gloria was transported to the hospital.
Allen managed to elude police for 4 days before an anonymous caller told police she was staying at a home 70 miles away from Oklahoma City. Police arrested her in Duncan, Oklahoma on December 5th. Just 2 hours later, Gloria, 29, died of her wounds.
According to Lieutenant Paul Kinman, one of the 2 police officers from the village who transported Allen back to Oklahoma City after her capture in Duncan, quote, "She became a bit emotional when we told her Gloria Leathers had died," unquote.
But soon afterwards, Allen began to claim she shot Leathers in self-defense. Quote, she claimed she never meant to hurt Gloria, but that Gloria had struck her with a garden tool at home. And then when she followed her to City Hall, Gloria threatened her with it again, unquote.
No garden tool was found at the shooting scene. Near the women's home, police recovered a .38 caliber handgun they believed was used in the shooting.
All right, so now let's get into the trial. So the state charged. I couldn't wait. This story is really picking up. So the state charged Allen with first-degree murder and announced that it would seek the death penalty. Allen's family approached a lawyer known to them. Believing that this was not a capital case, he agreed to take it for a fee of $5,000. The family scraped together the initial payment of $800, a decision they would later regret.
The attorney was Bob Carpenter, a sole practitioner who had never tried a capital case. When prosecutors announced that they were seeking the death penalty, Carpenter was horrified. Realizing that he was way out of his league, Carpenter asked the judge to allow him to withdraw from the case on the grounds that he did not have the resources to represent a capital defendant.
He had learned that the family was unable to pay for an investigator or any other expert to aid in the defense, which happens. It's the state with unlimited resources, and then you, the regular defendant person, and that they could not pay him for the remaining $4,200 either. He offered to act as co-counsel for free if a public defender was appointed as lead counsel.
The prosecution opposed the lawyer's motion, which is shitty.
Oh.
And the court refused to allow him to withdraw.
Ooh.
He was therefore forced to defend Wanda Jean Allen on a total payment of $800 with no co-counsel, no investigator, and no resources to hire expert witnesses, which is just, it's terrible.
It's terrible. It's a terrible decision.
I don't know how they allowed this to happen.
I don't either. And, we'll talk about the documentary, I'm sure, but those lawyers she eventually did get, ooh, gosh, my heart goes out to them. I love, there needs to be more men like them. They were so good. But she really did not get a good deal.
No.
From DNA testing to the Dixie Mafia, Crime Capsule brings you new stories of true crime in American history. I'm your host, Benjamin Morris. Join us for exclusive interviews with authors from Arcadia Publishing, writing the hottest books on the most chilling stories of our country's past. You can find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts or on evergreenpodcasts.com. Crime Capsule. History so interesting, it's criminal.
The truth about the Haditha massacre has been covered up, but not anymore.
I know you know what happened.
They went into houses and killed women and children.
What are you thinking?
What a mess.
U.S. Marines murdered innocent civilians in cold blood.
And at the center of it all
is 25-year-old Sergeant Frank Wuderick.
And me. Murder in House 2. A new podcast from Crowd Network.
So, evidence that Gloria had a history of violent conduct was central to the defense argument at Allen's trial. Allen claimed that she feared Gloria because Gloria had boasted to her about stabbing a woman to death in Tulsa in 1979.
The defense sought to corroborate this claim with testimony from Gloria's mother, Ruby Wilson, whom Gloria had also allegedly told about the stabbing. However, the prosecution objected and the court prohibited the introduction of such testimony because it was considered hearsay, which I don't think is right.
I don't think so either.
It doesn't matter if the stabbing happened or not.
Mm-hmm.
What matters is that Gloria told them that she had stabbed a woman to death. And so that's,
And that belief dictated Wanda Jean's actions or part.
Exactly. Or, that's the story anyway.
You know what? Vote for Beth for judge. Because, I mean, she could have decided this case with her eyes closed. I mean, I understand that there is a system and everybody says this is the best system it's not perfect, but it's the best we've got.
It's definitely not perfect. Yeah.
Definitely not perfect. And it just seems so wrong. And after that decision is made, it's like, what can you do? Well, judge, then I need more time or give me something. But they didn't give her anything after nothing. They took that away.
Yeah.
But, it is a murder case. So there's that too. So the prosecutors depicted Allen as a remorseless liar with virtually no objection from the defense. They introduced extensive testimony that Allen was the quote-unquote man in the relationship, that she went by the nickname Jean, the male spelling, and that she dominated Gloria. This is like super homophobia.
It is.
And if you wanted to make the jury in the 80s in Oklahoma not like a defendant, I mean,
this is the way
to do it. Yeah.
They also introduced as evidence a note that she had once written to Gloria, which read, quote, "I'm the type of person who will hunt someone down I love and kill them.
Oh, no.
Do I make myself clear, Gloria?" Unquote. So that's not good.
Oh, that's not
that
good.
That was not good, Wanda Jean.
No, Wanda Jean. But there's reasons why Wanda Jean might have believed that was okay. And we'll get into that later. But in what was likely an attempt to portray herself as a well-educated, stable career woman, Allen testified at trial that she was a high school graduate, who had obtained a medical assistant certificate from a local state college, none of which was true. Oh, my credibility bus is going off the cliff.
Defense attorney Bob Carpenter, with no resources to hire any investigators to look into Allen's background in detail, didn't know that she was lying about her educational background.
I feel like he could have searched.
I think that's one thing that he could have looked at.
I mean, for $800, I mean, you could at least
look at that.
Made a call. Yeah. So Allen claimed that she acted in self-defense. She said that Gloria had gotten out of her mother's car brandishing a rake and had charged at her with it. This defense was weakened by the fact that no rake was found at the scene. And Gloria's mother, Ruby Wilson, disputed Wanda Jean's account. Ruby testified. Now, remember, Ruby was there. She saw the whole thing.
Yeah.
And she testified that Allen shot her daughter at point-blank range after Gloria rejected Allen's pleas to return home.
Allen testified that after the dispute at the supermarket, Gloria, accompanied by her mother and police officers, returned to the house and gathered some of her possessions. Allen asked Gloria to stay and attempt to work out their difficulties.
When Allen followed Gloria to her car, Gloria grabbed a small, handheld, multiple-pronged gardening tool, identified at trial as a garden rake, and struck Allen in the face with it, causing extensive bleeding beneath Allen's eye. Allen retreated into the house to minister to her wounds. Gloria got in the car and left.
Now, remember, this is all Allen's story.
All right. Thank you.
Right. Allen testified she cleaned the blood off of her face with a small towel, then drove to the police station where she knew Gloria was going. Despite the time involved in going into the house at the same time Gloria left and wiping her face, she told the jury she followed approximately 2 car lengths behind Gloria.
The vehicle in which Gloria was riding was parked in a drive area of the police department off of the street. Allen parked in the street behind Gloria's vehicle. Allen got out of her car and reached the rear of Gloria's vehicle when she noticed Gloria approaching her, holding the garden rake.
At that point, Allen said she retreated back to her vehicle, opened the passenger door, and retrieved a pistol she kept in the glove compartment. She turned around to see Gloria very near her and accidentally shot Gloria during the ensuing scuffle. Whoops.
So prosecutors, noting that Allen had cried throughout the trial, suggested to the jury that her crying was insincere and a further sign that she was lying.
How is that allowed? How is that allowed?
Again, they already believe, they have these homophobic ideas that she's evil, can't be trusted.
She's a man.
Yeah, and lying about who she is and not living a good Christian life, whatever bullshit.
All that stuff.
And the prosecutors are just making it worse. Yeah. And I can't believe her counsel did not object.
Yes, I can't believe that they allowed that to happen.
Yeah, it's insane.
The jury did not deliberate for long before finding Allen guilty of first-degree murder. During the punishment phase, the prosecutors argued that Allen should be sentenced to death because she had been previously convicted of a felony involving the use or threat of violence, that she was a continuing threat to society, and she committed the murder to avoid arrest or prosecution.
Carpenter did not introduce any evidence about Allen's low IQ, her prenatal exposure to alcohol, the pair of severe head injuries she suffered as a child. Psychologists later surmised that these may have compromised her ability to control violent impulses, or her deprived and troubled youth.
Once again, jurors took only a short time to reach their decision, and on April 27th, 1989, Wanda Jean Allen was sentenced to death.
In a 1991 affidavit, Bob Carpenter stated that it was only after the trial that he learned about Allen's low IQ. Oh, no. He shouldn't have said anything.
Yeah.
In 1995, a psychologist conducted a comprehensive evaluation of Allen and found clear and convincing evidence of cognitive and sensory motor deficits and brain dysfunction, possibly linked to an adolescent head injury. So now, let's get into where are they now? Tell us, Beth.
All right. Well, Deidre Pettis was buried at Trice Hill Cemetery in Oklahoma City. Gloria Jean Leathers was buried at Green Acres Memorial Gardens Cemetery in Tulsa County, Oklahoma.
Allen spent 12 years on death row at Mabel Bassett Correctional Center, Oklahoma's only maximum security prison for women. And while in prison, she claimed to have become a born-again Christian and was no longer a lesbian.
As her appeals began winding down and she was left with fewer and fewer options, she began reaching out for help, and denying her sexuality was a prerequisite for some to side with her.
She asked for an audience with Theodis Payne, the host of a popular Oklahoma City talk radio program, and one of the only handful of Black folks in Oklahoma capable of spearheading the sort of public relations campaign that stood any chance of swaying the conservative Oklahoma governor, Frank Keating.
Payne was intrigued by Allen's case, but before agreeing to muster his troops behind her, he needed to ensure that he and Allen were on the same page when it came to one important matter.
According to Payne, when he asked about her sexuality, she said, quote, "I used to be a lesbian. I had interest in women, but I promise you, I've been converted as a Christian. And in my Christian faith, that is a sin. I am born again. That's the old me, not the new me," unquote.
And Payne replied, quote, "That's critical, Wanda, because when I go to start talking to these Black preachers, they have real issues with homosexuality," unquote. And this is just, it sickens me.
A quick culture corner there, 10 years ago, there was a belief out there that Black people are liberal to a point, that older Black people were quite conservative, actually.
Yeah.
If they, weren't voting, if existential threats to their existence weren't on the line every ballot.
If they were white.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
If they were white.
Exactly.
Yeah, they'd be voting conservative.
Yes, so 10 years ago, that may have been an attitude, but I do believe that amongst Black, older, more conservative Black folks, that attitude is changing.
Yeah.
That the belief is more like, yours and mine and allies of the LGBTQ community that, God and hate don't even go in the same sentence. So
yeah,
what are you talking about? Yeah. And the Reverend Robin Myers, who served as a spiritual advisor to Allen, said, quote, "I always suspected that Wanda's renunciation of lesbianism had more to do with helping to revamp herself in the most palatable way for her clemency and appeal process. She knew perfectly well that her being a lesbian was a big strike against her and that it's an embarrassment in the Black community. She was going to play the best hand that she could play at the very end," unquote.
Which, makes sense.
It makes sense, right?
Yeah.
I mean, her life is on the line, and
exactly.
we all would do whatever it took,
yeah.
I would think.
A fellow inmate, Pat Jones, who had spent 7 years on death row with Allen, said she once asked her friend a question. Quote, "I said, Wanda, we all know what it says in the Bible about men being with men, so it's a sin for women to be with women. How do you think God's going to look at that?" And she said, "Well, God made me, and the way that I am had to be the way that he made me," unquote.
That is t-shirt worthy or bumper sticker worthy, right? I mean, if the Christian's argument is the Bible says this, but it also says that I was created in his image, so then there can't be anything wrong for me, and there has to be an infinite way for human beings to exist if God is infinite.
Right.
That's my thought, but whatever.
Hi, I'm Sean McCabe.
And I'm Carrie McCabe.
We are, married, obviously, but we're also obsessed with the darker side of things.
True crime stories, alien abductions, poltergeists. If it leaves you scratching your head and keeping those lights on at night, we want to hear about it.
That's why we host the podcast, Ain't It Scary, with Sean and Carrie.
Every week, we bring our listeners a true story guaranteed to send chills down your spine. From history's most brutal serial killers to the mystery of spontaneous human combustion.
Yep, lots of these stories leave unanswered questions behind, and you'll get to poke through the rubble of the evidence with a hardened skeptic and
someone whose mind is more open to fun.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
You can find Ain't It Scary with Sean and Carrie wherever you get your podcasts, and on social media at Ain't It Scary. Come play with us.
At Allen's clemency hearing, evidence was presented showing her to have an IQ of only 69, which would qualify as mentally disabled. Allen testified that she was a changed woman since she became a Christian and, quote, knows the love of Jesus Christ, unquote.
But the prosecution used Allen's trial testimony that she was a high school graduate who had a medical assistant certificate as evidence that she was not mentally disabled or deficient, despite the fact that it wasn't true.
Come on! She really wanted, she can't win.
No.
Nothing seems to be going as it should, even in these proceedings that came after something really awful.
Yeah.
So on December 15th, 2000, Allen was denied clemency in a hearing before the State Pardon and Parole Board. This caused mass anti-death penalty demonstrations. Protesters, including the Reverend Jesse Jackson, called for a reprieve for Allen because of her mental disability and her poor representation at trial.
Citing a quote-unquote stunning combination of concerns about bias and injustice, the ACLU urged clemency for Wanda Jean Allen. In a letter sent to Oklahoma's Pardon and Parole Board, the ACLU said, quote, Oklahoma's health system failed when Wanda Jean Allen's serious mental problems went untreated. The state's criminal justice system failed when she was forced to receive inadequate representation and when bias based on race, class, and sexual orientation entered the courtroom, unquote.
ACLU is really onto something there.
Yeah.
Gloria Leather's family also did not want Allen to be executed. They just wanted her out of the general public so she couldn't hurt anyone else. And I'm so glad, restorative justice, we ask what the victims and the survivors want. And that should have played a part too.
It definitely should have, for sure. Yeah. Allen's execution was scheduled for January 11th, 2001. On January 10th, a federal judge denied Allen's request for a stay of execution and for a new clemency hearing. The following day, Governor Frank Keating, known for being an ardent supporter of the death penalty, rejected her request for a stay of execution.
Her execution went forward as scheduled on the evening of January 11th, 2001. Allen was too upset to eat. Her last meal consisted of a bag of potato chips.
Allen was executed by lethal injection at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester. 24 relatives of victims Gloria Leathers and Deidre Pettis traveled to McAlester for the execution.
Many of them watched the execution from behind a tinted window. When asked if she wanted to make a final statement, she simply said, quote, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do," unquote. She then looked over at her lawyer, jokingly stuck out her tongue at him, and died. She was pronounced dead at 9:21 p.m. She was 41 years old.
Allen was the first Black woman to be executed in the United States since 1954 and the first woman executed in Oklahoma since 1903. She was the sixth woman to be executed in the United States after the death penalty was reinstated in 1976.
None of those are good records to be proud of.
No.
So her final appeals and the last 3 months of her life were chronicled by filmmaker Liz Garbus in a 2002 documentary titled The Execution of Wanda Jean, and I highly recommend y'all check it out. So now we're going to get into our takes. What are your thoughts, Beth?
Well, I know she did some terrible things. She killed 2 women, but she was failed by so many people in so many different ways. First as a child and then later as an adult. Racism, sexism, poverty, and homophobia all played a role in the outcome of her case. And she so clearly did not get a fair trial.
Yeah.
This case was really frustrating.
Yeah, it is. That's a good way to put it. Frustrating. Again, there are these systems in place and we know they're flawed, but these flaws are so stark.
Big, yeah.
I almost don't, they're not, a mistake seems small. This is somebody's life hanging in the balance, and there were so many failures along the way. You're right. I couldn't agree more. The Bible Belt of it all.
Yeah.
And I was working on this script, and one of my kids was looking over my shoulder. They always look to see if I type bad words. That's what I typed. What did I call it? What did I call that president? Buttface Jackson.
Buttface.
Yeah,
Jackson.
just to see if they're paying attention. So, looking over my shoulder, and my kid goes, "This Allen person sounds like they did some bad stuff." And I said, "Yes, and hurt people hurt other people. Then it's not an excuse, but it can be an explanation." And I think the harm that Allen did to others resulting in their deaths and eventually in her own, lethal injection by way of execution. There were many harms done to Allen before we even got there.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say, where is Stefan from SNL? Because this case has everything. From top to bottom, front to back. All I see are victims. Everybody in this case is a victim. Even thinking about the trauma within Wanda's family of origin, which is generational.
Yeah.
And, she was injured so horribly. And I did look for that case where Gloria killed somebody. I couldn't find somebody. But if Wanda was like, I'm with this lady who is bragging about killing somebody, that I can understand why she might have justified violence being in that intimate partner relationship.
Right. It's hard to say exactly. I think that the defense that she put forward was a lie.
Yeah, I think so too.
But I do think that Gloria Jean told that story about stabbing somebody to death, because both the mother and Wanda Jean were told that story.
Yeah, we're told that story. Yeah. You wouldn't just tell your mom, I'd stab somebody today. I mean, wouldn't your mom rather hear about your smelling test or something else?
But it's hard to say why she told that story or if it was true.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah.
Like you said, we couldn't find evidence that it was true.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's not true. We just don't know.
We just don't know. You're right. Victims all around, not just Gloria in terms of her getting killed, Gloria Jean, but she was also a victim of the system. You know what I mean?
Right.
She was incarcerated, and she was also a, woman of color and a queer woman, and also, was not financially in a great position. I mean, she was getting a check for government assistance. You know what I mean? So all these people, I think in some ways were failed. I gotta believe that her mentality, secondary to more than one head injury, played a huge role in the case, and also in her relationships.
Right.
And her lack of, she couldn't resolve a conflict in a healthy way.
Yeah.
I mean, for God's sake, she was actually going. I mean, I was under the impression, because I didn't think that, she's making this up. When I watched the documentary, I was under the impression she was going to the police station to get them to help her.
Right.
And maybe in her mind, that was a thing.
I don't know. Yeah.
But I did believe her in the documentary when she said, my body was there, but my mind was not. Not an excuse, but just an explanation.
Yeah. I just don't know what happened, but the fact that she had so many issues.
Yeah.
That I just don't think it's fair what happened to her.
I agree. I don't think it's fair what happened to anybody in the story, if I'm being honest. I mean, even back to Wanda Jean's mom being subjected to just a really hard life that she clearly wanted to escape. Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot
and
for one.
The father left, and
poverty. All those things are. And so, we remember that true crime is true for somebody, but I think there are a lot of victims in this case. And so just love and light to all of them and all the people who loved Deidre, Gloria Jean, and even Wanda Jean. So Fruities, let us know what you think. Beth, where can the people find us?
Our website is fruitloopspod.com, and we use Fruit Loops Pod for all of our social media.
This is a weekly podcast, and new episodes drop every Thursday. So until next time, look alive, y'all. It's crazy out there.
My name is Bill Huffman, and I am a former Cleveland news producer, and I am now the host of the podcast, Who Killed? I began the show focusing on the unsolved murder of Amy Mihaljevic, and now each week I explore a different case with a focus on some of the victims who don't get the attention they deserve. I have a deep catalog of over 225 episodes, so there is a guarantee there will be something for you. Who Killed is an evergreen podcast, killer podcasts, and slow burn media production. Subscribe today wherever you get your favorite shows.
Something is creeping in, don't follow it down. Let me introduce you to Barry Clue, an authorised financial advisor from New Zealand and a very special kind of stain on humanity.
He was a very knowledgeable young guy.
He was a registered financial advisor.
Type of guy that was bending over backwards to help you.
Now, you could be forgiven for thinking that Barry sounds like a great guy. And you'd be right. Well, right up until the point when you're wrong.
It was all fictitious.
She stole from my son, who has a disability.
Chris never knew. He died believing that we're all taken care of.
A psychopath is somebody who lacks empathy, acts impulsively. I think there's a strong case that Barry might be all of those things, actually.
To find out how Barry Clue stole over $15 million from 81 victims, subscribe to Clueless, The Long Con. That's Clueless, spelt Klooghless.